The massive alien ship called Eternal Dominion floated above Earth like a giant black shadow. It was so big it blocked out the sun in some places. The ship had weapons all over it that could destroy entire cities with one shot. Inside this terrifying vessel, Commander Veltar looked down at the small blue planet below him. He had done this same thing 847 times before on different worlds across the galaxy. The process was always the same and always worked perfectly. First, show up with overwhelming force. Second, demand surrender. Third, accept the surrender. Fourth, take control of the planet. It was that simple. Every alien race in the galaxy had followed this pattern when faced with the Zephyrian hegemony's superior technology and firepower. Veltar expected Earth to be no different. Down on Earth's orbital defense station called Defiance, Captain Minho pressed his face against the thick glass window. His eyes were hard and weathered from years of military service. The lines on his face told stories of battles fought and friends lost. Behind him, his crew worked desperately at their control panels. Their human technology seemed like stone, aged tools compared to what the aliens had brought. The computers were beeping frantically. Warning lights flashed red across every screen. The alien ships were so advanced that Earth's sensors could barely detect them properly. It was like trying to track lightning with a magnifying glass. Lieutenant Jiwon suddenly looked up from her station. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her voice stayed steady. "Sir, we're getting a message from the big alien ship." She had been working for 3 straight days without sleep, trying to understand the alien technology that had appeared in their skies. The air in the center of the bridge began to shimmer and glow. Slowly, a 3-dimensional image formed in front of them. It was unlike anything any human had ever seen before. The creature stood 8 feet tall with a body like a giant insect. Its skin looked like black metal that had been polished to a mirror shine. Most frightening of all were its eyes, hundreds of small black circles that reflected light like tiny dark jewels. When the alien spoke, its voice came through speakers around the room. Somehow, their computers were able to translate the strange clicking and buzzing sounds into human language. "Weak humans," the creature said, its voice cold and emotionless. "I am Commander Veltar of the Zephyrian hegemony. Your planet and your people now belong to us. Give up fighting immediately. If you surrender now, we will not kill all of you." The bridge became completely silent. Even the constant humming of the life support system seemed to fade away. Every person on the bridge turned to look at their captain. Some were afraid. Others were angry. All of them were waiting to see what Minho would do. Captain Minho slowly stood up from his chair. His hand gripped the metal railing in front of him so tightly his knuckles turned white. For a moment, he just stared at the alien commander. Then something changed in his expression. His fear disappeared, replaced by something much more dangerous. "Let me ask you something, Bug," Minho said. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of every human soldier who had ever fought against impossible odds. "Do you know what we humans say when someone tells us to give up?" The alien's mandibles, the sharp claw-like parts around its mouth, clicked together in confusion. This was not the response Veltar had expected. In all his conquests, no species had ever asked him questions. They usually begged for mercy or immediately surrendered. "I do not understand your meaning," the alien replied. Captain Minho's lips curved into a smile, but it was not a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile a wolf might give before attacking. If the alien commander had understood human facial expressions, he would have realized he was looking at something very dangerous. "We say 3 simple words," Minho continued. "Come and take it." The holographic image flickered and disappeared. The transmission had been cut off. Around the bridge, the human crew began to understand what their captain had just done. He had not surrendered. He had not begged for mercy. Instead, he had just declared war against an enemy with technology far beyond anything humans possessed. Some of the crew members looked terrified. Others began to smile the same dangerous smile their captain had shown. In the depths of space, above them, Commander Veltar stared at his now empty communication screen. In 847 conquests, this had never happened before. Every other species had immediately surrendered when faced with the hegemony's power display, But these humans had done something impossible. They had refused to give up before the fighting had even started. Veltar's compound eyes reflected the lights of his ship's bridge as he processed this new information. Perhaps these humans simply did not understand how outmatched they were. Perhaps they needed a more convincing demonstration of Zephyrian power. He would give them exactly that. What Commander Veltar did not understand was that he had just made the biggest mistake in Zephyrian military history. He had threatened a species that viewed surrender as a word that existed only in alien languages. 3 weeks had passed since the aliens first arrived. Commander Veltar sat in his command chair, staring at reports that made no sense. According to all his military textbooks and centuries of experience, Earth should have been completely under Zephyrian control by now. Instead, his forces were losing ground every single day. The numbers on his screen told an impossible story. The humans were not just fighting back, they were getting stronger. Every day, his casualties increased, while human resistance grew more organized and more deadly. This had never happened before in the entire history of the hegemony. Down in the destroyed streets of Seoul, an old woman named Sergeant Kyung crouched behind a pile of broken concrete. Just 4 months ago, she had been teaching mathematics to high school students. Now she carried a weapon that she had built herself using pieces from destroyed alien machines. Her grey hair was tied back in a tight knot, and her eyes had the sharp focus of someone who had learned to kill or be killed. She watched the alien patrol drone floating above the street through a crack in the rubble. The machine moved in a predictable pattern, scanning left and right as it searched for human survivors. Kyung had been studying these drones for weeks, learning their weaknesses. "Listen carefully," she whispered to the 3 people crouched beside her. Sunho had been a taxi driver before the invasion. Nari used to work at a bank. Dohyun had been a college student studying art. Now they were all soldiers in humanity's fight for survival. Their targeting system takes about 1/3 of a second to lock onto a new target, Kyung explained quietly. That's their weakness. Sunho and Nari, I want you to run toward that building on the east side. When the drone turns to follow you, Dohyun will hit it with our homemade electromagnetic pulse device. The device in Dohyun's hands looked like a metal box with wires sticking out of it. He had built it using power cells salvaged from a crashed alien fighter. The irony was not lost on any of them. They were using alien technology to destroy alien machines. "Ready?" Kyung asked. The 3 younger fighters nodded. "Go!" Sunho and Nari burst from their hiding place and ran toward the building. The alien drone immediately swiveled to track them, its weapons charging up with a high-pitched whine. But before it could fire, Dohyun pressed the button on his improvised weapon. The electromagnetic pulse hit the drone like an invisible hammer. Sparks flew from its hull as its systems overloaded. The machine spun out of control and crashed into the street, breaking apart in a shower of metal and alien electronics. "Perfect," Kyung said with satisfaction. "Gather the pieces. Our engineers need every component they can get." This same scene was happening all across the planet. In Tokyo, a woman named Hyejin had done something the aliens thought was impossible. She had figured out how to use their own communication devices against them. The former office manager had organized an entire neighborhood into a spy network that intercepted alien messages and passed information to resistance fighters. The aliens had thought their communications were completely secure. They never imagined that humans could break their encryption codes. But Hyejin had spent days studying captured alien devices, learning how they worked through pure determination and intelligence. In New York City, Taehyun led a team of engineers who had achieved something even more remarkable. They had taken broken pieces of alien shield generators and rebuilt them into portable protection devices that human soldiers could carry. The former subway maintenance worker now commanded a team of the city's brightest minds, all working together to turn alien technology against its creators. But it was high in the Colorado mountains, where humanity showed its true nature. Min-jae, who had been a computer programmer before the invasion, had done something that sent shockwaves through the alien fleet. He had hacked into an alien fighter ship and taken complete control of it. The alien fighter now flew under human control, its weapons turned against the very fleet it had come from. Min-jae sat in the pilot's seat, his fingers dancing across alien controls he had learned to understand through weeks of careful study. The most amazing thing about their technology, he explained to other human commanders through a stolen alien communication system, is how they never thought someone might use it against them. They've been conquering planets for thousands of years, but they always fought species that were less advanced than them. His voice carried across resistance. Cells around the world. They think in straight lines, attack, demand surrender, take control. They don't understand creativity or adaptation. They don't think like us, they don't fight like us. Those words spread through every human settlement on Earth like wildfire. They don't think like us. It became a battle cry, a source of hope, and a reminder of what made humanity different from every other species the aliens had conquered. The Zephyrians had superior technology, larger ships, and more powerful weapons. But they had never faced an enemy that could look at their own technology and say, "We can build that better." They had never fought a species that turned every defeat into a learning opportunity and every captured weapon into a tool for revenge. Commander. Veltar received reports of the Colorado incident with growing alarm. The humans had not just captured one of his fighters, they had turned it into a weapon against his own fleet. This level of technological adaptation was supposed to be impossible for such a primitive species, but what truly terrified him was the realization that the humans were not trying to survive the occupation. They were not looking for ways to minimize casualties or negotiate better terms of surrender. They were actively working to destroy every alien on the planet. The humans were not fighting a defensive war. They were fighting a war of extinction, theirs or the aliens. And they seemed perfectly willing to die rather than live as slaves. For the first time in his long military career, Commander Veltar began to wonder if the hegemony had made a terrible mistake. Deep in space, aboard the massive alien command station called Nexus of Worlds, the most powerful beings in the galaxy sat in emergency session. The station was so large it could hold entire cities, and its meeting chamber had witnessed the planning of countless conquests over thousands of years. But today, the mood was completely different. 12 different alien species were represented in the chamber, each sitting in their own special environment pod designed for their unique biology. Some breathed methane gas, others required extreme heat, and some lived in pools of liquid mercury. Despite their vast differences, they all shared one thing in common. They were all terrified. Commander Veltar stood in the center of the chamber, his insect-like body showing signs of exhaustion that his species rarely displayed. His compound eyes, usually bright and alert, were dim and unfocused. The proud military commander who had conquered nearly 1,000 worlds now looked defeated. "The humans have completely destroyed our entire 7th Fleet," he announced, his voice echoing through the chamber's translation systems. "All 17 of our most powerful warships are gone. The humans turned their own cargo ships into weapons and crashed them into our vessels at incredible speeds." The silence that followed was deafening. In 50,000 years of galactic expansion, nothing like this had ever happened to the hegemony. They had faced resistance before, but never anything that resulted in the complete annihilation of an entire fleet. Representative Kolth, whose crystalline body resonated with barely controlled panic, spoke first. The Vorhai species communicated through vibrations in their crystal formations, and right now those vibrations were sharp with fear. "This should not be possible," Kolth's translated voice rang out. "In 500 centuries of expansion, no primitive species has ever destroyed even a single fleet, let alone an entire battle group." Before Veltar could respond, Commander Zexniel interrupted. The ethereal species existed as clouds of sentient gas, and Zexniel's form was swirling with agitation. "The problem is that they are not following any logical pattern of behavior. Our military computers calculate the best strategies based on rational decision-making. But these humans are not making rational decisions." Veltar's mandibles clicked. Together slowly, a sign of deep thought in his species. "We managed to intercept some of their communications," he said. "What we discovered is deeply disturbing. The humans are not treating this as a standard conquest that they must endure until they can negotiate better terms. They consider our very presence in their solar system to be a threat that must be completely eliminated. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Every representative in the chamber understood the implications immediately. The humans were not fighting a war of resistance. They were fighting a war of extermination. Many of the species in the hegemony had joined not because they wanted to conquer other worlds, but because they wanted protection from more aggressive species. Now they were beginning to realize that they might have joined the wrong side. Back on Earth, in what used to be the United Nations building in New York, a very different kind of meeting was taking place. The building had been damaged in the first alien attacks, but humans had repaired it, using a combination of their own technology and salvaged alien materials. Seojun stood at the front of the room, addressing the newly formed Human Defense Coalition. Just 6 months ago, he had been a university student studying philosophy and dreaming of becoming a teacher. Now, military generals who had spent decades in service listened carefully to every word he spoke. His voice carried clearly through the room and beyond, broadcast to every human settlement on Earth through their network of captured alien communication devices. "The aliens think they understand how war works," he said, his young face showing a maturity that came from facing extinction. "For thousands of years, they have conquered worlds the same way. They show up with superior technology. They intimidate the local population, and then they accept surrender." The room was filled with humanity's new leadership, former teachers, engineers, students, shop owners, and retired soldiers who had all become commanders in the fight for their species' survival. They listened intently as Seojun continued. "They have never faced a species like us. They have never fought an enemy that considers their complete destruction to be the only acceptable outcome." Yuna, who had been a marine biologist before becoming the commander of all human forces in the Pacific region, raised her hand. "Our scouts report that 3 more alien fleets are heading toward Earth. Each fleet is larger than the one we just destroyed. Standard military thinking would tell us to dig in and prepare defensive positions." The other commanders nodded. This was logical military strategy. When outnumbered and outgunned, you find strong positions and make the enemy come to you. But Seojun's response surprised everyone in the room. His smile was cold and sharp, like a piece of broken glass that could cut you if you touched it. "We are not going to follow standard military thinking," he said. "We are not going to wait for them to come to us." He walked to the large display screen that showed the positions of the approaching alien fleets. "We are going hunting." The room erupted in excited chatter as the commanders realized what he was suggesting. Instead of waiting to be attacked, they were going to take the fight to the aliens. Instead of defending Earth, they were going to attack the enemy before they could reach human space. It was exactly the kind of thinking that the aliens could not understand. Every species they had conquered had tried to minimize their losses and negotiate the best possible terms of surrender. But humans were not interested in minimizing losses. They were interested in maximizing alien casualties. This fundamental difference in thinking was tearing apart the alien alliance. Species that had joined the hegemony for protection were beginning to question whether they wanted to be part of a war against an enemy that viewed genocide as an acceptable military strategy. The humans were not just fighting back, they were rewriting the rules of galactic warfare. The alien colony of Kethmar had been a jewel of the Zephyrian Empire for over 300 years. Its beautiful crystal towers stretched high into the sky, catching the light from 2 suns and casting rainbow patterns across the peaceful city below. 12 million aliens lived there in comfort and safety, their advanced civilization having never experienced the horror of war. Their children played in floating parks, while their adults worked in laboratories that pushed the boundaries of science and technology. None of them had ever heard a weapon fired in anger. None of them had ever seen death come from the stars. They lived in a paradise built on the conquest of other worlds, blissfully unaware that their peaceful existence was built on the suffering of countless enslaved species. That peaceful existence ended when the humans arrived. Captain Hagen stood on the bridge of her warship, the UES Retribution. The ship had an interesting history. It had been built by the Zephyrians and originally called the Silent Thunder. 6 months ago, it had been part of the alien fleet attacking Earth. Now it served humanity, its alien crew dead and its systems modified by human engineers who had learned to make alien technology work even better than its original creators. The ship looked like a patchwork quilt of different technologies. Human weapons had been welded onto the alien hull. Earth-made computers were connected to alien engines through miles of improvised wiring. It should have been impossible for such a hybrid system to work, but human engineers had made it not just functional but deadly. Hagen had been a commercial pilot before the invasion, flying cargo planes between Asian cities. Now she commanded a starship and a crew of 200 people who had all learned to fight among the stars. Her bridge crew had once been teachers, mechanics, shop owners, and students. The invasion had turned them all into warriors. "Captain," called out her weapons officer, a man named Dongyun who had been repairing refrigerators just a year ago, "we have clear shots at all 6 orbital defense platforms." Through the bridge windows, Kethmar looked beautiful and peaceful. The crystal spires gleamed in the double sunlight, and small aircraft moved between the floating city sections like graceful birds. It would have been easy to feel sorry for the inhabitants, but Hagen had seen the ruins of Seoul and remembered the bodies of human children killed in the first alien attacks. "Target the orbital platforms first," she ordered. Her voice was calm and professional, showing no emotion. "Remember what we're here for. We're not here to take over their world. We're here to make sure they can never threaten Earth again." The battle began with a flash of light, as human weapons powered by alien energy sources tore through the defensive platforms that had protected Kethmar for centuries. The aliens had never expected an attack on their homeworld, and their defenses were designed more for show than for actual combat. What followed was not really a battle, it was an execution. The human fleet moved through the Kethmar system like a surgeon's knife, cutting away anything that could pose a future threat. Military bases, weapons factories, spaceports, communication centers, all were destroyed with ruthless efficiency. 3 hours after it began, the attack was over. Kethmar, which had been home to 12 million aliens, was now a dead world. Its crystal spires lay shattered, its floating cities had crashed to the ground, and its 2 suns shone down on empty ruins. But Kethmar was not the only target. Across the galaxy, similar attacks were happening as human fleets struck deep into alien territory. The species that had thought Earth was impossibly far away were discovering that distance meant nothing to an enemy that had learned to modify. Captured starships Jungmin, who had been a high school chemistry teacher, now led a special forces team that had infiltrated and destroyed the hegemony's most important research facility. The aliens had been working on new weapons to use against Earth, but their laboratory was now a crater, and their scientists were dead. Haeyun, a former bus driver from Busan, commanded a fleet of 12 captured alien ships that had been converted for human use. Her target had been the hegemony's primary military academy, where alien officers learned the tactics they used to conquer worlds. The academy had trained generals for 5,000 years. Now it no longer existed. But the most devastating attack came from an unexpected source. Young-ho had been a biochemist working for a pharmaceutical company before the invasion. He had spent his days developing medicines to help sick people. Now he used his knowledge of biology for a very different purpose. Working in a laboratory, hidden deep beneath the ruins of Mumbai, Young-ho and his team had studied captured Zephyrian prisoners for months. They had learned how alien biology worked, how their immune systems functioned, and most importantly, how to create diseases that would affect aliens but leave humans completely unharmed. What they created violated every rule of civilized warfare that had existed in the galaxy for millennia. It was a targeted bioweapon, a disease designed to kill only one specific species. The ethical implications were staggering, but Young-ho had seen too many human children die to worry about alien ethics. His assistant, Mi-jin, looked up from her computer screen with a mixture of satisfaction and horror. She had been a medical student before becoming a warrior scientist. "Sir, our biological agent has achieved 97% effectiveness across the target population. The Zephyrian homeworld's major cities have been completely neutralized." Young-ho stared at the data on his screen. Millions of aliens were dead, killed by a disease his team had created in what used to be a medicine factory. He felt no joy. At the success, only the grim satisfaction of a job that needed to be done. "Send the data to all human fleets immediately," he ordered. "Make sure every species that supported the hegemony's attack on Earth understands what happens when you threaten humanity." The message that went out across the galaxy was simple and terrifying. The humans had not just developed biological weapons, they had developed targeted biological weapons that could wipe out entire species while leaving humans untouched. Any alien race that had joined the attack on Earth was now a potential target for complete extinction. Across the galaxy, alien civilizations that had stayed neutral during the Earth invasion began to panic. The humans were not conquering worlds, they were sterilizing them. This was not warfare as the galaxy understood it. This was extermination on a scale that had never been seen before. Species that had joined the hegemony for protection now realized they had made themselves targets. The humans were not interested in ruling alien worlds or enslaving alien populations. They were interested in making sure that no alien species would ever again consider humanity to be easy prey. The galaxy was learning a harsh lesson about the difference between conquest and extinction. The ancient space station called Harmony's End had been built at the exact center of the galaxy, floating in neutral space where no single species could claim ownership. For over 10,000 years, it had served as the meeting place for the Galactic Council, where representatives from hundreds of different worlds came together to discuss matters of universal importance. Today, the station buzzed with nervous energy as delegates from 200 different species gathered for an emergency session. The topic of discussion was something that had never appeared on any council agenda before: how to deal with what they were calling the human problem. The irony was almost too much to bear. Less than 2 years ago, these same delegates had barely noticed when the Zephyrian hegemony announced their intention to conquer a small primitive world called Earth. The humans had been dismissed as just another backward species that would quickly fall in line with galactic order. Now those same primitive humans had destroyed 17 different alien civilizations and controlled a growing section of the galaxy. Ambassador Somin walked into the Great Council chamber with the quiet confidence of someone who held all the cards in a deadly game. At 35 years old, she had been an international law professor before the invasion. Now she represented the most feared species in the galaxy. Flanked by her 2 military advisors, Jihoon and Yeji, she moved toward the central speaking platform while hundreds of alien eyes followed her every step. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering, designed to accommodate the wildly different environmental needs of its diverse membership. Some delegates floated in tanks of methane gas, others existed as pure energy contained in magnetic fields, and still others required temperatures that would instantly freeze or boil most other life forms. Despite their vast differences, they all shared one thing in common. They were all terrified of the small human woman walking toward the podium. When Somin began to speak, her words were automatically translated into hundreds of different alien languages through the station's advanced communication systems. "Honored delegates," she said, her voice calm and measured, "I stand before you today not as someone who seeks to conquer or rule over others, but as the representative of a species that has learned something very important about what it takes to survive in this galaxy." Before she could continue, the crystalline representative of the Vorhai species began to vibrate with barely controlled panic. The Vorhai communicated through resonant frequencies in their crystal bodies, and now those frequencies were sharp with fear. "The human coalition has completely eliminated 17 different member species of the former hegemony," the translated voice rang out across the chamber. "Your actions go against every principle of civilized warfare that has existed for millennia." Somin's face showed no emotion as she responded. "The hegemony violated the most basic principle of all, the right of human beings to exist. We responded in the only way that made sense." A gaseous delegate from the ethereal species, existing as a cloud of sentient particles contained in a force field, spoke up next. "You have turned entire star systems into graveyards. Billions of innocent beings are dead because of your actions." "Yes," Somin replied with simple honesty. "We did exactly what was necessary to make sure that no species in this galaxy will Ever again look at humanity and see easy prey. The chamber exploded into chaos. Hundreds of different alien voices began speaking at once, some protesting, others making demands, and still others issuing threats. The cacophony of different languages and communication methods created a wall of sound that would have been overwhelming to most beings. But Somin simply stood quietly at the podium, waiting patiently for the noise to die down. When silence finally returned, she continued speaking as if nothing had happened. The former hegemony made a critical error in their thinking, she said. They assumed that all intelligent species in the galaxy share their ideas about surrender and submission. They believed that when faced with superior force, any rational species would choose to live as slaves rather than die as free beings. She paused and looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many delegates as possible. They were wrong. Somin gestured to Jihoon, who activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber. The three-dimensional map showed the current state of the galaxy, with different colored zones representing different political controls. The red zones, indicating human-controlled space, had grown far beyond Earth's original solar system to encompass dozens of star systems that had once belonged to the hegemony. We have established new rules for how humanity interacts with the rest of the galaxy, Somin announced. Any species that approaches human space with hostile intentions will be treated as a threat to our very existence. Any species that attacks human colonies will find that their own homeworlds become military targets. Any species that threatens humanity will learn why we are the only known intelligent species in this galaxy that has never surrendered to anyone. The chamber fell into stunned silence as the implications of her words sank in. This was not diplomacy as the galaxy understood it. This was a declaration that humanity considered itself to be in a permanent state of potential war with everyone else. The final vote was swift and unanimous. Resolution 2847, which would become known throughout the galaxy as the Human Directive, was passed without a single dissenting voice. The official text appeared on screens throughout the chamber in hundreds of different languages. Warning: species designation, Homo sapiens, human classification, apex predator recommended contact, protocol, non-military engagement, authorization, strictly denied mandatory response to human presence, immediate withdrawal as the council session ended. Alien delegates hurried to their ships with unseemly haste. Many of them were already planning to move their civilizations as far away from human space as possible. Yeji approached Somin with a data tablet containing the latest reports from human expansion fleets. Ambassador, we have updates from our territorial operations. 12 more star systems have formally requested human protection, and the former hegemony territories are integrating successfully into our administrative structure. Somin nodded and walked to the massive viewing window that showed the stars beyond the station. What about the alien populations in those territories? Those who accepted integration into human society are adapting well, Yeji replied. As for those who resisted, she paused meaningfully. There was no further resistance after we made the first example. As their shuttle departed Harmony's end, Somin reflected on how much had changed. The galaxy had learned a truth that would reshape interstellar politics for generations to come. There was one species among the stars that treated the concept of surrender as something that existed only in alien dictionaries. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy through superior technology or overwhelming numbers. They had conquered it by being the one species that would choose death over slavery every single time, and in proving that point, they had ensured they would never have to make that choice again.